Last time we were looking at, we just introduced the concept of globalization, right? And we actually defined globalization as a trend, whereas we are looking at nations, right? And this trend, it's to do with the, uh, uh, the way these economical issues are happening worldwide. So we're looking at it as a trend, but now this trend is globally done. That's why we call that globalization. And then I still remember that within that trend, for trend to be trend in globalization, we actually said that there must be interdependence. So that issue of dependency has to be there. That's why we cannot talk about globalization without talking about interdependence or interdependence due to these economies of scale. So that's what we actually looked at last time. And again, I remember that actually talked about globalization of markets, where in globalization of markets, we actually said that it refers to the convergence to the buyer preferences, whereas now buyers, they have to meet, they must converge, so that when they converge, where do they converge? In markets around the world. So that issue of globalization of markets, again, we had to look at that in details, that within that globalization of markets, we have got products, and out of these products, and the products, they can be sold worldwide. Either they can be the clothes, electronics, whatever. So that convergence of the buyers, that is referred to as the globalization of the market. In other words, globalization of the market has to do with the product, and again, it has to do with the competition. They have to compete, because when these buyers come together, the issue of competition still stands. So we looked at that in detail. And again, from there is where now globalization of market, we categorized it into several areas. I remember we actually talked about globalization of markets having importance through the reduction of marketing costs. We looked at that, where we said sometimes we actually said that companies that sell global products can reduce some of the costs due to either standardization or due to other factors. So we looked at that most times this globalization is very, very important, because it is one way of reducing marketing costs, and at the same time creating new markets opportunity. We looked at that. And another area that we looked at is globalization of production. Remember that? Right. We defined what is globalization of production. So in globalization of production, we actually worked at this production having the advantage of one, accessing lower cost workers, so that when you are looking at production, it is one way that you can access these workers, but at a low cost. And at the same time, we looked at sometimes you are there to access technical expertise, and again accessing production input. That's what we looked at last time. So we looked at the globalization, being to do with the markets, but these markets are happening across the borders, out there, but they are having advantages, because within globalization of markets, with the globalization of production again, of which we had to say that I think these issues, globalization of markets and production, they are happening simultaneously within the same goal. But now, today we are trying to switch to another area And this area is what we call forces driving globalization. Did we reach up to that? Or we reached up to forces driving globalization?
Barriers to trade, technical innovation.
Is what?
Barriers to trade, technical innovation.
All right, today we are looking at barriers to trade. All right, very good, very good, very good. Barriers to trade and, all right, so we'll look at barriers to trade. So we'll define what are these barriers to trade. What are barriers to trade? And we'll look at that. This one. Okay. Then we are looking at barriers to trade. In other words, there are ways of either promoting trade or ways of those barriers to trade. That's what we'll be looking at today. Technical innovation. We did.
Barriers to trade, technical innovation.